Monday, September 27, 2021 by Benjamin Fulford. Biden, controllers ask for peace after a secret East-West agreement. The controllers of the false regime of Joe Biden complain for peace, according to P3 Masonic sources. You ask for a conference in Liechtenstein, soon. The reason for this is that a secret East-West agreement was reached in principle last week to pull the plug on the Biden regime, according to sources involved in the negotiations. The controlled implosion of this horrific regime would be followed by a massive multi-billion-dollar East-West project to improve the planet, the sources said. Here is a message from an Asian secret society of which Chinese President Xi Jinping is a member. We will speed up our discussions to meet the 30-day deadline. That will not be visible to normal society. There will certainly be great movements beneath the surface. Quote.
WDS と話したことは早速こちらで協議し30日がタイムリミットとして急がせるので、一般社会では現れることはないかもしれないが、大きな動きが水面下である起きることでしょう。Further detail on the WDS negotiations and the agreement with the Asians will be published below in the story.
It is interesting to note, however, that Canadian banks will close on September 30th on National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Our sources say it is to prevent them from being pillaged by Biden's controllers as they desperately try to meet their payment deadlines. In any case, this agreement follows in principle all sorts of international deceptions and real-life espionage stories that will certainly provide film feed for decades to come. First, let's take another look at what was behind the so-called Australian submarine deal that mysteriously infuriated Beijing. US, Australian and UK authorities took action in Australia after it was found that all sorts of politicians were blackmailed or bribed to turn the country over to China through a combination of Chinese communists and Rothschild-Rockefeller intrigues. This was part of an agreement they had made to hand Australia over to China in exchange for continued support for the Biden regime. Here is a concrete example. Prime Minister Daniel Andrews of the state of Victoria has joined the Chinese Initiative Belt and Road Infrastructure behind the back of the federal government. Even after sustaining a back injury from falling down the stairs, he placed his state under the longest and toughest COVID restrictions in the world. Web links. This is the real story as revealed by Australian intelligence sources. Daniel Andrews has a Chinese mafia business partner in the background. Several million have been given to Andrews for the approval of numerous projects in Victoria, funds from his Chinese supervisors. Andrews was caught in a hotel room with the little daughter of his Chinese boss. Could it have been a setup? He was beaten almost to death. His head was badly injured, resulting in a fractured skull. His vertebrae and several ribs were broken. He was almost paralyzed. He was told that from that day on he was their boy and had to do whatever they told him to do. His wife knows the truth of what happened. Failure to obey the orders of his CCP leaders means some elimination for him and his family. As Andrews was told, accidents happen every day. Now you understand the reason for the construction industry to shut down for 2 weeks across Victoria. Look at the riots that are taking place. Watch carefully which group comes back to work. Andrews has to put the vax on all Victorians. These are his marching orders. Web links to F1771C828D 412BCC6E7FB2EC42B43B8. Now you know why unreported, in the propaganda media, scenes like this happen every day in Australia. Web links. The sudden flood of shallow earthquakes in Australia is also related to this. Pentagon sources say the earthquakes were all related to the destruction of underground bases there. A source from an Australian agency explains, Australia contains the world's most important underground facilities, built like underground hotels where the global elite seek refuge after carrying out their original plan, a global extermination, and only want to come out when the dust settles. Has no longer. Australia is not the only country that is not being extradited to China as promised by the Rockefeller, Rothschild mafia and their avatar, Biden. In Japan, for example, a lot happens beneath the surface. To illustrate this, here is a photo of a U.S. Navy prisoner ship that has arrived at the U.S. base in Yokosuka. The prison ship is filled with vaccine pushers and Chinese communist agents, Japanese far-right and MI6 sources report. While not much can be said for operational security reasons, we can confirm that Japanese Ninkyo organizations disparagingly known as Yakuza are mobilizing against the vaccine mafia and its henchmen. For its part, the Japanese military has made it clear that if no action is taken, it will occupy Parliament, the Prime Minister's office, the Bank of Japan and the national broadcaster NHK. They eventually decided to take action after it was found that 3.6 million doses of vaccine destined for Japan contained poison. Web links. Now let's take a look at why Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou was placed under house arrest in Vancouver, Canada. Her arrest had nothing to do with Iran, but with the money laundering of the Khazarian mafia to install dangerous 5G systems worldwide. China has been led to believe that the attack on Huawei is directed against China. Many powerful Chinese were also involved in a cover-up to hide their involvement in the mass murder attack on Wuhan, China, in early 2020. The deaths in Wuhan, which are likely to run into the millions, occurred only in the areas where 10,000 5G transmission towers had been activated. If it was a pandemic that caused the deaths, then the people in the suburbs and neighboring cities should have died too, but they didn't. Meng was released because China finally understood and, according to CIA sources, has agreed not to push 5G any further. Asian secret societies have also received evidence that the entire pandemic was an attack on everyone, not just the Chinese. They received detailed organizational plans of the groups behind the fake pandemic and the very real and dangerous vaccination campaign. Web links. This is the Western high treason analysis. They will all be executed, promises MI6. With the resignation of German Chancellor Angela Hitler, the last great protection, these criminals had ceased to exist. To enlighten those who still don't know why we call them Hitler, the Mossad provided us with their analysis of their genealogy. Hillary Rockefeller Clinton is a half-sister of Angela Hitler Kastner Merkel, add Mossad sources. Here's what a British king had to say about her. Glad we got rid of the bad junk. A horrible monster, a thug, a bully, and ugly to look at. I hope she rots in hell, for this woman has caused us a lot of trouble over the years. In any event, her overthrow enabled the vaccine sluice to be cleaned up by killing the Khazarian mafia top politician, sources said. You can be sure that her henchman Emmanuel Macron will soon follow her into political oblivion if not executed. Needless to say, German and French millionaires are fleeing to Switzerland in droves now that their leader is gone. This is why the fake Biden's inspectors, including Hillary Rockefeller, have asked for a meeting in Liechtenstein to be hosted by a group known as the Bilderberg. Bilderberg is a 570-year-old society of distinguished personalities that originated in the Principality of Liechtenstein in Europe. Web links. Since the WDS sends representatives to the Lion's Den, it is likely that one of them will attend the meeting. We will keep readers informed if and when such a meeting takes place. Let us now provide a more detailed account of the meeting between the WDS and the Asian Secret Society that took place last week and was reported by a witness to the meeting. The negotiations last week between a representative of the White Dragon Society and a representative of a large Asian secret society went well. There was a general agreement to work together for world peace and launch a massive campaign to end poverty and stop environmental degradation. However, the Asian representative said earlier discussions about a world future planning agency had been rejected by many because, to quote, Europeans speak with forked tongues and cannot be trusted. Instead, they wanted to go through the BRICS and the existing Asian development banks. It was explained to them that most of the so-called BRICS leaders were only servants and that there was no way through them. The WDS negotiator responded with the parable of the frog and the scorpion. The story goes that a scorpion came to a riverbank and asked a frog to carry it across on its back. The frog said, "But won't you sting me?" The scorpion promised not to sting him, and so the frog carried him across the river on his back. When they were halfway across the river, the scorpion stung the frog. The frog asked, "Why did you do that?" The Scorpio replied, "Because that is my nature." The WDS representative then said, "You have to understand that when dealing with a scorpion you have to be careful that it does not get an opportunity to sting." The Asian representative laughed and said, "Of course, so we're going to use a poisonous frog to make sure that if one betrays the other, both of them die." As a result, Chinese President Xi Jinping will soon present a proposal to establish a new international organization to deal with issues that affect the entire planet. The details are worked out by diplomats. Asian societies also agreed to examine the facts and take appropriate action to confirm that the sham pandemic was just an excuse to vaccinate humanity with DNA-altering and possibly even fatal vaccines. They also said that the Chinese and other Asians would soon stop wearing masks. They agreed that it might be necessary to simply wipe Switzerland out with nuclear weapons in order to remove the root cause of the problem. The representative of the Asian Society also had some interesting information about the USA. They said a decision had already been made to unplug the bogus Biden administration even before the WDS asked for it. The Chinese said they expected Donald Trump to return as US president. The WDS advised the entire US government to pull the plug on September 30 to drain the swamp. They said Trump's return would be a good thing, but only if he gives up his insistence on introducing vaccines. Otherwise, General Mike Flynn has been recommended as the next US president to clean up the chaos the country has become. The other thing that was confirmed by both the Japanese right and the Asian representative was that Takaishi Sanae would become Japan's next prime minister. She would become Japan's first female prime minister. The WDS said Sanae could become prime minister, but only if she made